afternoon, everyone. My name is Fermin Kub. We are live from Glasgow at COP26 as we are closing to the wrap-up of the first week. We are hosting a really lovely event today, focusing on one of the key topics, the summit, which is food systems and nature. We have a great panel with us today that will be discussing some of these key actions, basically how we can bring research and innovation into food, land, and water systems, which are crucial elements as we discuss the climate goals. We have a side event today, which will be focusing on the demand side perspectives on the challenges and opportunities for climate adaptation in this interlinked system. So thanks everyone for joining. There will be room for questions, so start thinking of them as you hear from our panelists today. We'll be starting off with our first speaker, Dr. Claudia Sadoff. Claudia is the Managing Director of Research, Delivery and Impact at CGIAR, who will be giving a joint opening remarks together with Dr. Beth Danforth, who is the Vice President of Agriculture, Human and Social Development at the African Development Bank. Claudia, if we can start with you.
Thank you so much, Fermin, and I am delighted to welcome everyone to this COP26 official side event being convened by the CGIAR, the CGIAR Research Center ICARDA, and the African Development Bank. You know, every COP tends to be described as a pivotal moment, but we are seeing clearly now that the window for really responsible and timely action is closing quickly. So as scientists begin to tell us that we're on the verge of tipping points being breached, we realize that 2021 is a moment in time that is critical for action. So at this COP, climate change is, the focus on agriculture within climate change is finally coming to the fore. Climate change is destabilizing our food systems, making it more difficult to grow food for a growing population, while at the same time protecting our natural world and resources. We need to produce more food to nourish more people, but in ways that is resilient to climate change. And if that's not challenging enough, we need to mitigate agriculture's contribution to the climate challenge and the emission of greenhouse gases from our complex food systems. If we're to limit global warming below the 1.5 degrees of the Paris Accords, we need to produce and consume foods in ways that fundamentally change. We need a fundamental rethink of our food systems with the kind of science-led innovation that saved millions from hunger and famine in the 50 years since the CGIAR was founded. A transformation of global food systems can be a win-win for ending global hunger and achieving net zero. It's a message that's picking up speed this year with a major boost at the UN Food Systems Summit and amplified at the meetings of the G7 and the G20. And collectively at this COP, the message is being voiced loudly through the Global Action Agenda for Innovation in Agriculture. And at the UNFSS, we were also reminded that this transformation requires scientific research and innovation to provide the evidence of what works to best accelerate the necessary changes. And so at CGIAR, we're especially pleased to be a partner in the ambitious Agricultural Innovation Mission for Climate, AIM for Climate, launched earlier this week by President Biden and the UAE, which will focus on accelerating the climate-smart agricultural innovation. This initiative is yet another example of the growing recognition that we must ramp up our support for agricultural research. At the Global Citizen Live event in September, CGIAR welcomed generous pledges from the European Commission, Belgium and the Netherlands. And then here at the COP, we've been enormously grateful to hear commitments from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Canada, and the US. With sustained support and investment for CGIAR's new research and innovation portfolio, we increase our chances of uncovering a new set of solutions to confront the climate challenge and to scale up and scale out the innovations that we have worked on. Innovations that can both reduce the contribution of agriculture to climate change and adapt our farmers to its increasingly evident consequences. All while maximizing the synergies for livelihoods, nutrition, and equality. As the single greatest threat to sustainable and equitable global development, climate change is a unifying theme for the mission of CGIAR, and it cuts across all that we do. The new CGIAR initiatives will address challenges at the intersection of climate and agriculture, food, land, and water systems at several levels. In genetic innovations, CGIAR stewards genetic resources and addresses barriers to achieving rapid improvement of crop varieties in response to changing climate conditions. In resilient agri-food systems, CGIAR is focusing on increasing agricultural productivity sustainably, increasing the availability of safe, nutrient-dense foods, and reducing environmental footprints and threats to human health. In systems transformation, CGIAR is working with partners on the levers for system-wide changes towards sustainable, healthy, and equitable food, land, and water systems through shifts in markets, policies, strategies, and institutions. Today, we will be hearing about some of the exciting examples of climate solutions from within the new CGIAR portfolio. And following that, I look forward to hearing the perspectives of our panel on the challenges and opportunities inherent in those initiatives. Ultimately, in order to understand how we can better target our work and efforts to take action for a brighter future. How research and innovation applied to food, land, and water systems will be instrumental in helping countries achieve their commitments to the Paris agreements and avert a climate catastrophe. I very much look forward to our discussion, but first, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Beth Dunford, the Vice President for Agriculture, Human, and Social Development at the African Development Bank. Over to you, Beth, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I wanted to just highlight today that we know that innovation is the basis of all progress. And the incredible 2% annual increase in agricultural productivity globally is, of course, driven by agricultural research and development, and by extension to get innovations to farmers. One CGIAR is at the heart of that research and development. And the African Development Bank's relationship with CGIAR tells a story of more than 2 decades of collaboration in Africa, working together to deliver new and proven technologies to raise agricultural productivity across the continent. To give a couple of examples, one, the bank provided funding to Africa Rice, a 1CGIAR research center to disseminate new rice for Africa. These were varieties that we helped to support from 2005 to 2010. These varieties are higher yielding, more pest resistant, drought tolerant than many other varieties. The bank also funded a 1CGIAR research centers like IATA, IFPRI, ICARDA, ICRISAT. You know how we love the acronyms in the research and development sectors. And this was all from 2012 to 2017, and the bank financing helped implement a massive project enhancing cassava, maize, rice, and wheat productivity. So the African Development Bank's flagship program, Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation, or TAT, as we like to call it, has provided men and women farmers across 27 African countries with proven agricultural technologies. Importantly, these technologies, such as drought-tolerant maize, heat-tolerant wheat, help farmers adapt to climate change and dramatically increase yields. So TAT's impact under the implementation of 1CGIAR research centers and other partners is impressive. African food production has expanded by more than 12 million metric tons. In Sudan, for example, TAT has helped farmers double the nation's wheat production from 1.1 million metric tons during the 2019 to 2020 season. Wheat yield increased from 1.5 metric tons per hectare to 3.5 metric tons. We are well on our way to achieving the target of reaching 40 million farmers, 20 million of them women, with climate resilient and improved technologies like high quality seeds, breeds, and fingerlings. So we were one of the earliest supporters of 1CGIAR, the newly restructured group of international agricultural research centers. As the restructuring decision was being made, our bank president, Dr. Adesina, sent a video message of support to the 1CGIAR Systems Council meeting in China. Dr. Adesina said that the 1CGIAR should take technology to the farmer and build on the bank-supported TAT model that has 11 CGIAR centers scaling modern food production technologies to millions of African farmers. The bank has taken up Dr. Adesina's call a step further, efforting to raise an additional funding for upstream development of new technologies from 1CGIAR, regional, national research and development centers. And in April, the bank and IFAD convened a high-level meeting of heads of states, multilateral development bank leaders, and partners. The coalition pledged more than $17 billion to support the scaling of successful innovations and boost to research and development. This high-level dialogue on feeding Africa also resulted in a call for a financing facility for food and nutrition in Africa. This financing facility is the mission 1 to 200 vision of the bank to raise $1 billion in the next 2 years to double the productivity of 40 million farmers to produce an additional 100 million metric tons of food, enough to feed 200 million people by 2025. The bank looks forward to bolstering its collaboration with CGIAR on a shared mission to adapt African agriculture to climate change, to increase the livelihoods of millions of Africans who rely on agriculture for income, and improve the quality of life for the people of Africa. Thank you.
Thanks, thanks, Claudia, for the great presentations. Now we are moving to the second part of our side event today, in which we'll hear 4 presentations specifically on 3 different climate solutions. We have 3 presenters who are joining us here in Glasgow. Dr. Martin Fregene, who is the Director of Agriculture and Agro-Industry at the African Development Bank. We have Mr. Ali Abousabaa, who is the Regional Director for Siwana, Cgir, and the Director General of ICARDA, and Dr. Ana Maria Loboguerrero, who is the Research Director for Climate Action for the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT, and also the Head of Global Policy Research for the Cgir Research Program on Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security. We'll start with Martin, if possible. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Roberto. And thank you to CGIAR for inviting the African Development Bank to share with you some achievements of our flagship project, Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation. You know, this discussion is coming at a very opportune time. 17 of 20 of the world's most climate vulnerable countries are in Africa. 6 of the 10 most vulnerable to droughts are also in Africa. If you combine that with, the disruptions of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and also with the invasive pests, locusts, you realize that there's an increased number of hungry Africans, people going to bed without food. It has risen from 214 million people in 2015 to 249 million people today. A recent FAO and World Food Program hunger spot report showed that of the 20 countries at the risk of acute hunger and famine in the period March-July 2021, 16 are in sub-Saharan Africa. But the truth is, technologies exist to climate-proof and to raise productivity of African agriculture. But the truth is that very few African farmers are actually getting it. If you look at the recent review of the Comprehensive Agricultural Development Program, CADAP, it showed that only 5 out of the 37 countries reviewed are actually on track to increase the number of farmers getting improved seeds. And only 4 actually are on track to reach the target of 50 kilograms per hectare of nutrients. But these things shouldn't be so. Look at the impact of this, of farmers not using the best technologies. The US grows maize on 60 million hectares. Africa grows maize also on 60 million hectares. But the US produces 400 million tons of maize. Africa produces just 90 million tons of maize. It's a ratio of 1 to 5. So I think for us at the bank, we believe very strongly that if you really want to change Africa's agriculture and adapt to climate change, you must put the very best technologies into the hands of farmers. So TAT, as we call it, and you heard my VP just talk about TAT, it's the bank's response, to putting technologies into the hands of farmers. And the goals of TAT is to double productivity of 40 million farmers and to produce an additional 100 million tons of food, enough to feed 200 million Africans and reduce the number of hungry Africans by 80%. So what is TAT? TAT essentially is a coalition of CGIAR as lead, the governments, seed companies, and the national research programs, farmer cooperatives, all coming together to design a roadmap to get the best technologies, seeds, livestock breeds, and fingerlings of aquaculture into the hands of farmers. TAT has 15 compacts. I talked about the platform for technology and delivery. 9 of them, relate to priority commodities. 6 of them are just enablers like capacity building, policy, and things like that. And so what TAT has done in the last 3 years or so, in the last 4 years, is actually a crop campaign to get the best technologies into the hands of farmers. And Beth, my VP, I've just spoken about the work that has been done in Sudan. ICARDA, who's the lead center, I'm happy the one CGIAR, person in charge of ICARDA is also here today, and he will speak more about that. 65,000 metric tons of certified seeds was produced in Sudan, planted on 317,000 hectares of irrigated land, and it doubles Sudan's wheat production in just 2 seasons. I think it's doable. We have demonstrated it's doable, that you can put technology into the hands of farmers if you have the right players and you have the right financing, at the table. Same thing also in Ethiopia. 45,000 metric tons of certified seeds was produced in 2 seasons, and again, on 184,000 hectares of lowlands, very hot areas of Ethiopia, not very conducive for wheat production, but they were able to increase by an additional 1 million tons of wheat. And there's so many achievements also in drought-tolerant maize in Kenya, in Zambia, in Zimbabwe. And today we have 11 million farmers actually using these new technologies. So we believe at the bank that this is very, very possible. And what we're doing right now is what you just had my VP talk about. That's the mission of 1 to 200. That's we want to raise $1 billion to reach 40 million farmers, double their productivity, and provide enough food for 200 million Africans in the next 4 years. We believe that is very possible. It is very doable, and we call everybody to join us in this mission to reach zero hunger in Africa in the next couple of years. Lastly, we have demonstrated that actually getting technologies into the hands of farmers indeed does increase productivity, indeed does improve livelihoods, and indeed does help them become more resilient to climate change. And then also it saves the forest, it saves fragile environments from being used by the same farmers. So we believe that with the mission of 1 to 200, we will eventually achieve the targets of climate-proofing African agriculture and also feeding Africa at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. Really powerful message and powerful words. Ali, over to you.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy and glad to be with all of you today. We've heard the big picture from Claudia about what was going on with regards to the transformation of the CG, and the very strong vote of confidence that have been coming from a variety of donors to support the transformation process, and of course to support the implementation of the One CGIAR strategy 2030. We've also heard from Beth about that the fact that it is possible, if you're able to mobilize the right level of funding, to mobilize technologies, put technologies into farmers' hands, like has been explained by Martin, then you're able to see quick results. So what I'm going to try to do very quickly is to give a sense to our participants about one of 32 examples that are currently constituting the future portfolio of the 1CG. That covers a variety of areas of research that brings the entire skills and capacity from across the CG. So the example that I would like to talk about today is the one with regards to the CWANA initiative, the part of the world which I have the honor and the pledge, the honor to actually lead the actual implementation of these programs in this part of the world. So why CWANA? CWANA is a part of the world, as you could see on the screen, that is most hit by the impact of climate change. It has very important characteristics because it basically accounts for 1/3 of the agricultural land globally. It carries about 1/3 of the population in the world, and it has almost half the number of livestock in that part of the world. But it's also one of the most water scarce parts of the world that suffers from significant challenges around increased population, conflict, migration, and a number of other challenges. And the combination of all of these elements actually constitute what we call the perfect storm. We're also seeing increased expansion of the desertification. We're seeing those deserts coming southwards. We're seeing northwards and also eastwards, which really complicates the situation much further. And like I've mentioned, all of these elements combined constitute a perfect storm that we're trying to see how within the research portfolio, the future research portfolio of the CG, we could make our contribution by leveraging the scientific capacity from across the system to deal with those areas. Our approach here is to try and put the transformation of the land, food, and water systems at the heart of the research programs of the CG. And that will require a very different model, both in terms of the conduct of the research we do, but also in the implementation of these programs. If we continue to grow food the same way and consume the food in the unsustainable forms that are currently going on, we will not be able to deal with the future challenges. And that is a very significant threat globally. To be able to transform the food systems, we want to be able to leverage the digital technology. We want to put the research outcomes, 50 years of research outcomes from the CG, and then be able to embrace new approaches and leverage technology in ways that we have not done before. And like I've mentioned here, the aim is to try and reduce the inputs, the water, the chemicals, the energy, but also in a manner that would enhance the nutritional content of the food that we produce, and possibly also look at ways to also change the way we consume food ourselves. MENA is not only full of challenges, it's also full of opportunities. There is a vast and keen and qualified workforce. There are important jobs in the agriculture sector for women and the youth, and a very strong and big market. And there is a scope for scaling up and embracing the climate smart innovations in partnership with a very strong set of NARS partners within this part of the world. So in trying to achieve our objective, we're going to be addressing these challenges at different levels, looking at crop diversity, farm diversity. We're looking at ways where we could improve the nutrition to try and also improve the human immune system to be able to deal with challenges such as the recent COVID. Now, when it comes to the Siwana initiative itself, it's basically embraces the four key areas that Claudia mentioned earlier on. There is going to be focus on the biodiversity conservation, the genetic innovations, and inclusive seed systems, a very fundamental area that needs significant investments, especially in Africa, like has been highlighted by the African Development Bank. The sustainable and resilient farming systems and intensification to increase agricultural value chains and profitability. The third area is sustainable water and landscape management and energy systems. And the fourth area is scaling digital innovations to build climate resilient agriculture value chains. And of course, embracing all of this is a strong element of monitoring and evaluation and learning so that we are able to evolve and adjust as we progress. Initially, this is going to cover 5 countries that are representative of the Siwana initiative, but it is designed in such a way that you're able to bring in more countries as we continue to scale up. 2 very quick examples is the whole concept of desert farming, the interaction between the crops, the trees, the livestock, and the land, and bringing the new forms of renewable energy, and doing this in a multi-sectoral, multi-thematic areas of research that would maximize the opportunities for food production for people who are actually living in those areas. Second example is how do we leverage digital dynamism for inclusive agro-ecosystems. The whole issue about the land reform, how you do leverage remote sensing to be able to inform policy within the landform resource space. How do you leverage geotagging for better management of the agriculture systems? How do you help farmers through the extension on the day-to-day basis by leveraging mobile technologies? How do you put all of these elements together so that you're able to manage your systems in real-time basis using the satellite systems and offer better and more reliable and real-time advisory services? So in short, this is going to be a very exciting portfolio that brings research capacity from across the entire CGIAR systems to work together in ways that we have never done before. And the idea is to bring in the maximum benefits in the most accelerated way to be able to help the region and many other parts of the world to deal with the climate crisis and be prepared for the future tomorrow. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of these thoughts.
Thanks, Ali. Very interesting insights as well. Ana Maria, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I'm going to present another one of the initiatives that Claudia mentioned of this new portfolio of the CGIAR. And it's a very relevant initiative for what we are discussing during these 2 weeks, because it basically addresses the issue of building systemic resilience against climate variability and extremes. And you know, many people say that one image is worth more than 10,000 words, and I think that this is the case, and this is why I wanted to start presenting this image, because these kind of situations are the ones that this initiative, Climber, it's going to address. And the way that we started thinking about this initiative, building this initiative, was by really understanding what are the main bottlenecks to be able to build this systemic resilience against climate. And just to mention 3 of them that we would like to address through the implementation of this initiative. The first one is that we are still lacking a transdisciplinary multi-system approach to which is basically a transdisciplinary multi-system challenge. And we need to work on that. If we want to build this systemic resilience, we need to think in terms of transdisciplinarity and multi-systems approaches. The second bottleneck that this initiative would like to address is the limited farmer empowerment and adaptive capacity. So farmers need to be able to build their own resilience against climate variability and extremes. And then the third one deals very much with the pace that we need to bring these solutions, these innovation packages, and Claudia mentioned that, the urgency to act. And somehow we have been failing in terms of bringing our innovations to scale at the pace that it's needed to trigger this transformation. So these are the main bottlenecks that this initiative, Climber, would like to address. And then the other thing that we did during the process of building this initiative was really listening to stakeholders and really understanding what are the needs of these stakeholders in terms of building this systemic resilience against climate. So we engage in 52 listening sessions where we basically listen to government partners, to farmers association, to the private sector. In total, more than 1,400 stakeholders were engaged in these listening sessions. And basically what we wanted to understand deeply was where is the demand, how the CGIAR can bridge the gap with our knowledge generation. And therefore, what came out from that was really addressing this issue of building systemic resilience against climate through thinking about 4 key research questions. And what is really exciting about this initiative is that we are going to go beyond understanding the ways in which populations are vulnerable to climate variability and extremes, but really going deep into understanding the underlying factors that perpetuate climate vulnerability. Because if we don't understand these, then we're never going to be able to build this systemic resilience. And at the heart of this initiative, something that is really, really important is that we are not going to develop just innovation, but we are going to think about innovation packages where we are considering social, ecological, and technological dimensions and the combination of these. Even though this is a global initiative, we are going to be focusing in 6 countries: Kenya, Senegal, Zambia, Morocco, the Philippines, and Guatemala. But the idea is that through the lessons learned of implementing these innovation packages on the ground, we're able to reach many other countries around the world. How we're going to do this? We're going to be working through 4 work packages with 2 cross-cutting themes. So everything that we are going to do in this initiative, it's going to consider gender and social equity and the component of climate finance. The first work package deals very much with reducing risks, considering a value chain approach. And this, it's very much related to putting climate information in the hands of farmers so that they can make better decisions, with a big component on digital tools that we believe that can be a game changer in terms of scaling. The second work package, it's interesting because it's an innovation in the types of partnerships that the CGIAR has been forging in the past. And this is really being able to build production system resilience through recognizing and acting upon the relationship among climate, agriculture, security, and peace. The third work package deals very much with policy, not only policy formulation, but implementation, both private and public policy and institutional development. And it's given to stakeholders the right type of tools so that in the policy we can promote this fact of building climate resilience. And then the fourth one, which we believe that needs to be there if we are serious about this resilience, it's really focusing on promoting multi-scale governance to empower decision-making by farmers. We need to empower farmers so that they can build their own systemic resilience against climate variability and extremes. And all the initiative at the end of the day, it's about impact. We need to be able to use our research, our innovation, our science, and this needs to be translated into impact. We believe, and our theory of change says that we can be able, through this initiative, to reach by 2030 more than 30 million farmers that are using these innovation packages to build their systemic resilience against climate variability and extremes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ana Maria. So we've heard so far really interesting concepts and presentations. Now we are moving into another section of the event today, which is focusing on a panel discussion with three panelists that are joining us live, who are Teresa Wong, the Natural Resource Officers at the FAO Regional Office for Near East and North Africa, Ismael Zunga, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions, and Kunal Prasad, who is the CEO and the co-founder of Cropping. So we'll be discussing basically whether the solutions that we have been mentioning so far are filling the most important gaps, whether they are doing well, how we can improve them. And following the panel discussion, we'll be doing a Q&A. So we are welcoming everyone to follow up with questions. So if you have any questions based on what you heard so far, please bring them forward. We'll start with Kunal. Thanks for joining us, first of all. You will have 3 minutes to answer this question. What do you see as the major obstacles to improving agricultural productivity in Africa? What is TAT doing well, and how can TAT improve its impact? Thanks, Kunal.
Thank you. So I think one of the important things which was also mentioned by Martin was that out of the initiatives, 11 million farmers which are already under the program, we have seen massive improvements in terms of increasing productivity. And that has come from one of the very basic initiatives in terms of getting access to right quality seeds. So one of the fundamental problem which is there existing in the African ecosystem is to have right quality of seeds in terms of inputs, right quality fertilizers, chemicals, all of which are very essential elements in terms of helping the crop grow in the best possible manner. The second element, if you talk about, is the right knowledge and know-how that should reach to the farmers. It's about making a holistic solution accessible in the hands of the farmers, which means the farmers should be knowing what to grow, when to grow, and how to grow in the best possible manner. Which means if you want to select a crop in your particular plot of land, then when you should be doing the sowing? What are the package of practices which are required for a hybrid quality of wheat to be grown so that you can maximize your productivity? What is the type of irrigation scheduling, the pest and disease recommendation that is required in terms of
I think we lost you, Kunal. I think we lost the audio. Oh, there we go. There we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you can come back, the first of the initiatives would be obviously bringing access to inputs, which is the seeds, right quality seeds, right quality fertilizers, chemicals, all of which are very, very essential in terms of improving the productivity. There has to be a massive investment that has to go in terms of making it accessible for all the farmers. But I think in terms of private-public partnerships and the government playing an important role, this can be made more and more possible. The second is in terms of as the agriculture ecosystem in Africa is predominantly held by majority of the smallholder farmers, you have to make this knowledge accessible to these farmers as a very low cost, which means technology is going to play a very, very important role in terms of making real-time information accessible to the farmers. And these information should enable the farmers in terms of selecting their crop, when they should be, what should be growing, when they should be growing, how they should be growing. And all the knowledge which is residing within the one CGIAR ecosystem should be all made available so that the farmers can benefit from that. And we have seen that such knowledge base, when reaches the farmers in some of our programs, have helped by increasing productivity by between 50 to 60% by the same set of crop which the farmers were growing. The third initiative which I would, and which was also shared was then in terms of strengthening the ecosystem in the rural areas, which means if a farmer has to change his practice and adopt a new system, he needs to have a local support. So having your extension team strengthened by the government or public or private institutions, having agropreneurs created in those areas which can transform and make lead farmers trained and sustain the initiatives so that they can change the farmers and they can see the benefit, would be long lasting. So I think these are the three things which, if we can bring into the agriculture ecosystem in Africa, would be revolutionary.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kunal, for those insights. Teresa or Ishmael, do you want to follow up with something that Kunal said?
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. So we can move to Teresa. We have a question for you. So does CGIAR Siwana Regional Integrated Initiative address the region's main climate adaptation challenges? How so or how not?
Thank you so much for allowing me to comment on this very exciting new reorganization. I think we, FAO and ICARDA have stood for a long time together as collaborators working in this region. And this is a region, of course, that presents very, very strong opportunities to work across the nexus of water, energy, and food. I heard a lot of things about this long-standing 50 years of research. This is a lot. And the first speaker also alluded to the fact that we have a lot of solutions before us. And so we also know that I think almost half of the solutions that we need to stay within the climate goals that we have communicated come from the agri-food systems. So this is an opportunity for a region that is really facing a lot of these challenges. I think according to also studies, we know that all of the countries in the region, however way you cut it, the West Asia, North Africa region, in all the countries, adaptation has been communicated in the NDCs. 86% of these countries prioritize water resources, which is not at all a surprise. We also find that 64% of these countries prioritize agriculture for those who have communicated adaptation as a priority. So while we work on water resources in FAO and ICARDA, I think we join you in continuing to work on issues of water harvesting and water efficient agriculture and climate smart agriculture. We also don't want to forget, for example, land and soil resources. And I think this is also part of the initiatives that you have communicated. The example on desert farming, the fact that this is an alignment of solar irrigation, carbon sensitive farming, and sort of energy goals. I think this is the type of integrative projects that we're looking at. So I guess I will just use maybe the last moments of my intervention to talk about how I think the next opportunity is really for us to come together to work in the space of climate finance. And we've heard so much about the climate finance gap, and this is the issue in adaptation right now in the region. Adaptation. Countries have communicated that they need so much more funds in adaptation than is being committed. The water and sanitation and the agriculture, forestry, land use sectors are still some of the sectors that are most lagging behind in adaptation finance. So we can talk about the quantity of finance, and this is something that the COP is about, but we should also maybe talk about the quality of our interventions in terms of making sure that this climate finance really fits and matches the priorities of the NEDA region as communicated in the NDCs and in all our interactions together with countries. For FAO, there's also a belief that as part of this climate finance pledge, we really need to invest more in innovation and climate smart agriculture in order to make this intervention strategic, targeted, and with quality and not just quantity. So I think given ICARDA's strengths in research, the access that is available, we have so many opportunities.
I think we lost you, Teresa. I don't know if you can hear us. Okay, I guess we can jump to Ishmael. So Ishmael, we have a question for you. So in terms of scaling adaptation solutions for farmers, what do you see as the main challenges? Is CGIAR Climber initiative adequately addressing those challenges?
Thank you very much for the question, and I'll frame my remarks in relation to what I consider to be the main issues and challenges that farmers are facing, around which maybe research and innovation and the whole CGIAR system might need to consider. I think there's the first one really talks to the very basics of life or living conditions under which most of the farmers live, where it is devoid of backbone infrastructure, no roads, no dams, no electricity, no water, no clinics, basically nothing that really guarantees the dignity of human life. And to expect that there's going to be change without that kind of infrastructure might not get us to where we want. So how does research come to bear with that? How does policy and innovation put their thoughts together and address that? The second one really is about the governance of value chain. We know the power imbalance is such that farmers will end up getting much less than what other value chain actors get. And regardless of whether you ramp up productivity, the result is the same. They'll still get a few pennies. In any case, we argue that the system has delivered poverty and destitution to farmers, even if they do better. So if you don't address the issues of fairness and equity in the distribution of risk and reward, it remains a pipe dream in my view. So, and the question is, how does policy, innovation, and research deal with that? And the third one really is about also to do with equity and fairness in the distribution or in access to factors of production, land and the rest of it, finance included, and transitional sort of arrangements included. Again, they get just a bit, and unless we sort that one out, it will be very difficult. So these are bread and butter issues that needs to be dealt with. The question is whether, and most of them might not be of a technical nature. They may actually reside outside technical research. But if you look at where research is going, it is much more technical, which is not a bad thing. But if it does not deal with the basics of life, that technical will still be perfected, but will be rejected by the system. Not because farmers want to reject it, but because it's simply not possible. Furthermore, if the efforts of farmers in the ecosystems management role they play is not recognized and is not paid for, you don't expect that they are going to behave in a way that protects it. If a tree, as an example, is worth dead more when it is dead than when it is alive, because of destitution, don't expect that there will be better management of that. So I'm trying to bring the research agenda back to basics, back to the fundamentals. You cannot teach someone about crop nutrition, as an example, when they're struggling about baby nutrition. Where are our priorities? And I quite like the way that Anna Maria framed it, that it's a bundle of solution. I'm not saying it has to be sequenced like that. We need a bundle of solutions that talk to the realities of farmers' lives. And bearing in mind that farmers are people, first and foremost, they are not only farmers. We decide to see them in the lens of farmers, and therefore we want to hit them with farmer solutions, when actually we need to hit them with human being dignity solutions first and foremost. I stop here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ishmael. I really liked your last point there. So we have one final question that I'm going to ask each of you to comment on. So the question is, how can we bring different stakeholders together to support this important work that you guys have been highlighting, for example, through funding or partnerships? I'm going to start with you, Kunal, if possible.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think that's one of the important things that we have seen is an ecosystem approach, which is thriving on a large scale platform. And this could be most likely a technology platform, which could basically enable the ecosystem to come and work transparently in one single place. We are talking about ag stack platforms, and where we are able to digitize the farmers, know about where the farms are, what are the farmers doing, what crops they are growing, things around that. Now that ecosystem, once the platforms are developed on a foolproof digital manner, then we can provide services like quality inputs, quality seeds, quality fertilizers and chemicals easily and accessibly to the particular farm set of farmers. The second thing that we also have learned is that on those AgTech platforms, there's a lot of data that gets generated. And once you overlay that data with other additional data like satellite data or weather data, the insights of that could be leveraged by institutions which can come and finance that set of farmers. Which means that if I'm able to provide visibility about a certain group of farmers in a certain area, we can have easy access to finance reaching out to them. And the third is in terms of creating an ecosystem where private sector players, government, development sector, or even institutions which are interested in supporting these farmers can come and collaborate on one single stack and then create a value-added services on top of that. So all in all, what happens is that a solution which could basically help the farmer entirely from end to end, which means giving them access to inputs, giving them access to advisories, access to finance, and access to markets. If this is all brought in a very holistic manner and supported by institutions, it becomes a framework for a large-scale development which could be scalable with millions of farmers which can be benefiting from that. This is one of the initiatives that we have done, and we have seen that it's giving a far-reaching results for even the smallholder farmers in remotest parts of the world.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kunal. So, Teresa, the same question to you. How can we bring different stakeholders together to support the important work?
Thank you very much. I just have a simple answer. I'm very inspired also by Ishmael's call for human-centered solutions. I think we need to understand what works in different contexts. There's no one solution. The digital way, it's also one way to go. But we should use existing networks. We should use existing practices. For example, in FAO, we've had quite a lot of success in the farmer field schools. Very, very on the ground, very quick, close interaction with farmers, extension services. I think we should not ignore these kinds of tested methodologies to bring people together that should still exist in midst of all the other kinds of transformations. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. So, Ishmael, can you comment as well on this?
Yeah, I also agree with what the previous speaker just said, and just emphasize that in many ways, a lot of the elements that we're talking about are there. It perhaps is a question of how do we connect the dots in such a way that we have one solid thing rather than the current fragmented approach that each organization or each initiative is focusing on this. And just to caution maybe at this point also to say that unless there is proper alignment between innovation, and innovation really has to reside in policy, has to reside in in institutions, and much more the socio-economic side also needs to be engineered before and together rather with the technical side. And we do believe that for scale, the infrastructure I spoke about earlier on is so fundamental to arrive at scale, but also believe that digital solutions might actually give us, including policy, those innovation areas could actually move on a large scale at speed and perhaps at the lowest cost and at the highest impact. So I think that's where innovation should lie. I'm not saying that technological things are not important, but let's refocus a little bit. Let's rebalance the whole system to speak to the multiplicity, as alluded to by Anna Maria earlier on, of requirements of the typical farmer. Over.
Fantastic. So thanks Ishmael, thanks Kunal, thanks Therese as well. So we heard from really interesting comments and feedback from our panelists. Now we are moving actually to hear from you guys, so to our audience. So we are opening the microphones and the cameras to actually hear from you. We have a few minutes to take on questions, which we welcome through the chat function. So if you guys have any questions, please bring them forward and we can share them with our panelists here. I can start off things if that's possible. Actually, as we are wrapping up the first week of COP, I was wondering what were your impressions specifically on food systems and the integration of food systems into the climate discussions this week. Is it in line with what you guys were expecting? Were you expecting for something more? So we can start up with that discussion. Does anybody want to comment on this? Beth?
Well, I think I'll just say to start, I think that, I mean, we know that in Africa, for example, 4% of climate emissions are coming from Africa. So when you're talking about climate change in Africa, you have to be very focused on climate adaptation. And I think we need to increase our focus, obviously, on climate adaptation, and agriculture is front and center on that. 2/3 of the African continent derive their livelihood from agriculture, and the connection is huge. So I think that, you know, we're seeing an increased focus on agriculture, but it needs to be more. And what do we do to help farmers adapt to climate change? And that's why I think that the technology piece is so important, because that is one central piece that's going to help. It's not the only piece, but again, it has to be the cornerstone of what we see.
Thanks for that. Ana Maria, something else you want to comment?
Yeah, I think that we have seen interesting things coming out this week in relation to food and climate, but certainly we need to see more. And really, this is the time to act. If we wait, and that's why I believe that some of the relevant things is being able to bring these bundles, these packages to scale very fast. If you think about the Sustainable Development Goals, some countries, there are just 9 seasons to reach 2030 and to reach those targets. So this is coming soon. And we need to reach many farmers during the following years. But I think that, I mean, if you go back 6-7 years ago, agricultural was totally absent in these meetings, totally. So I think that there has been progress, but certainly we need to speed it up, and we need to see all those commitments that different stakeholders are doing. We need to see this happening, and we need people to be accountable for these things as well. That's important.
Thanks, Ana Maria. Martin, Ali, something you would like to comment?
Yeah, I think it was Bill Gates who said earlier that as we work on adaptation, as we work on getting to zero, we should also remember social justice. The poor farmers actually bear the biggest brunt of climate change. And there's no way we can, think about, fixing climate change without also thinking about these people whose lives are actually being pushed, to the edge. And so I'm really happy that the world is also thinking about, having, equitable distribution between mitigation and also adaptation. And most of that money hopefully will go into agriculture, and will go into, like what the colleague from India said, we're going to giving at scale the best technologies to farmers to help them become more resilient, more productive. They become like agribusinesses, small agribusinesses, and then the whole world will be definitely better off. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. I think we have a question, if that's the case. No? Yes? No? Okay. So Ali, we follow with you.
Yeah, I think, I'm personally encouraged to see where we are today compared to where we were a few years ago. I think, like Anna mentioned, agriculture had very limited, if any, space, except maybe from side events and people who strongly believe on what this could be. But I think where we're still not there in the sense that agriculture is not just a problem. I think agriculture can also be a very important solution to the climate crisis. And I think that's why we have the transformation of the land, water and food system at the heart and the center of the new strategy for the Cgir. And I think the fact that we recognized systems in the past are no longer fit for the future, that we come together to catalyze and bring all of this research capacity to be able to work in a different way. I think at the center of what we do, we should be able to demonstrate and provide the science evidence that agriculture could be an important solution to the future problems.
Thanks, Ali. Claudia, something you want to comment? Yeah.
Sure. I'd like to say that there have been some really exciting announcements made at COP this week. Really important fundamental agreements on deforestation, on methane emissions and other fossil fuels. And this has been very much the focus in recent years on fossil fuels and a very welcome emphasis on land use. I think our next big goal has to be to raise the profile more of agriculture. And I think we came to a great start this week. I think the Aim for Climate initiative is really very exciting, and the UK's Agricultural Innovation Mission as well. These are tremendous opportunities for all of us. We at the CGIAR are enormously grateful for nearly $1 billion in pledges for our science to transform food, land, and water systems. We ride on the heels of the UN Food System Summit, and I'd like to challenge us all in the agriculture community to make the next COP one that has agriculture front and center, to really move on the commitments, just as my colleagues have said, the commitments that we've heard here this week, and begin to come back next year with some responses, some impact, and some real momentum to take agriculture really into the heart of the solution space for climate.
Definitely, yeah, I fully agree. We do have a question now from an online participant. We are hearing you.
Thank you, Chair. My question is just in perspective of the donors and investors, for example, the banks, and what would be the pathway for the investor perspective to achieve a system-level transformation that is economically profitable and environmentally sustainable? So how the technology and the collective actions can play a role here?
Thank you. Are you addressing the question to somebody specific or anybody on the floor?
In general, to everyone, especially the bank side, like a donor side.
Okay, thank you.
At the system level.
Fantastic. Does anybody want to start off?
I think what we haven't talked about here today is the private sector. If we're looking at how do we get these innovations out to farmers, obviously there's a role for research organizations, a role for extension, a role for government. But again, it's the agro-dealers, it's the small, medium-scale enterprises that are out there that are actually going to really be getting these technologies out to farmers in a very sustainable way. And so we need to make sure that we're supporting these businesses to grow. And I think that's the sustainability. So do these businesses have finance that they need at the scale that they need? Do they have business development services? Do they have access to the technologies or the research organizations talking to them? So I think that's one of the key elements that we really need to think of for the sustainability and the future of the food systems and the innovations we're talking about here today.
Thank you. Kunal, Teresa, is there something else you want to follow on?
I would just like to add in terms of the learning of the success stories in those private sector investments coming from other successful stories could be very, very important. because the time at which you would like to act and scale and be successful should be as short as possible. And you have several of these programs running in different parts of the world, smallholder farmers, developing economies. I think it's very important to co-create, co-learn from these programs already running, and then bring a stronger framework when we are developing a new program in a certain area.
Thanks, Kunal. Teresa, something else you want to add?
No, I think that I also support the more targeted sort of investment in time and energy by bringing together the research and science to leveraging climate finance. And I think we're all agreed that we should contribute to this growing and strengthened architecture of climate finance in the region. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kunal and Teresa. We have a second question.
Hi, this question is for Anna Maria, and it's, do you think that global and systematic resilience to climate extremes can be tailored to respond to urgent and nutrition needs in unstable situations like war or unrest?
Thank you very much for that question. Yeah, I believe that there is a role to play in there, and that's why one of the work packages of this initiative on building systemic resilience against climate variability and extremes is going to focus on really understanding that relationship and acting upon. Once that we understand how climate interacts with peace, with fragility, with nutritional issues, then it's a lot better to being able, through research, guide decisions in terms of where money should be allocated and prioritize that. And we really believe that in some countries, if we don't address these linkages, these relationships, we're never going to be able to build this resilience. So it's not a matter of just not doing. It's that if our goal is to be able to build this systemic resilience, if we don't consider conflict, fragility of the economies of these countries, and if we don't understand how this dimension interacts with climate, then we're just like, we're missing half of the variables in the equation. So those linkages, we really need to understand to connect the dots, and therefore being able to inform policies and investments that can address those issues.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ana Maria, and thanks everyone for the questions. We do have time for one more in case there's somebody else who wants to break the ice. Okay, I guess not. Well, thanks everyone, and thanks to the audience for your questions. They are highly welcome. So we heard today from panelists here in Glasgow and panelists online on how we can transform the food, land and water systems in a climate crisis. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to pass it off to Claudia, who is going to give us some closing remarks. Thanks everyone again.
Thank you so much, Fermin, and thanks to everyone for joining us. I really feel that the conversation was very beneficial for me, very thought-provoking, absolutely. We've had some valuable insights here in order to help us really shape our thinking as the CGIAR moves into its next phase and its new portfolio of work about how we can really drive our research and innovation for the sustainable transformation of food, land, and water systems, how we can accelerate the progress that needs to happen in this decade of action. We heard, as a bit of a summary, we heard from colleague Martin Fregene about the really exciting example of the African Development Bank's partnership with CGIAR on technologies for African agricultural transformation. It's a truly powerful multi-stakeholder coalition that is serving to provide proven technologies scaled out across Africa to really strengthen resilience to shocks and variability. We heard from my colleague Ali Abousabaa about the exciting initiative going on in Siwana in Central and West Asia and North Africa to address drought and climate variability. And the centrality of gender and social inclusion of governance in that context, the need to integrate capacities at multiple scales to really mitigate against these drivers of fragility and conflict. And the necessity to support a much more coherent set of policies that look jointly at synergies for food, land, water, production, growth. And finally, we heard from Ana Maria Loboguerrero about the Climber Initiative, which is really exciting and is challenging us to really think big and think differently about the way that we can strengthen climate resilience for these extraordinarily vulnerable smallholder farmers in the global south, and how the CGIAR is really fairly well positioned with the substantial knowledge base that we have, and perhaps most importantly with the truly expansive network of partnerships that we have built over the last 50 years to help us drive adaptive change in these areas. We then had a panel discussion, which I thought was really fascinating, highlighting the role of the private sector and the way truly holistic and well-designed sort of public-private partnerships in a holistic, in more holistic and ambitious ways can really leverage the innovations and resources that we have available to us. We heard about the importance of climate finance, which is an area, again, that agriculture is really moving into. Again, I hope we'll hear more at the next COP about ways in which we can leverage climate finance for the adaptation and mitigation opportunities in the agriculture space. And very importantly, we heard from Ismail Sunga about the importance of reality checking ourselves, remembering just how enduring the challenges on the ground are around equity, and the importance of taking a very human lens to everything that we do, the challenges around poverty and empowerment and basic human needs and basic human dignity that have to be the goal of everything that we do. In the end, he spoke about how we put it all together, how we connect those dots, and how we connect that back up to policy and institutions, and that's very much at the heart of some of the new structure that we're looking at in the CGIAR. This level of scales that I spoke about in the beginning, from the genetic innovations at the very micro scale through to the resilient agri-food system production scale, very socially integrated, and up to systems transformation, where we talk about those institutions, the incentives, the social norms, as well as the economic and natural systems in which our agricultural and food and land and water systems exist. So we had a lot of, I thought, really interesting conversations today about what the CGIAR is doing, what our colleagues are doing, what we all need to be doing more of. And I think what it also really spoke to today was the need not only to step up research and innovation, but to step up our partnerships to manage this complexity, and in order to take innovations to scale and to target those innovations for the human beings, the farmers, and the people that we're really working for. In the CGIAR, we're built on over 3,000 partnerships worldwide, including very valued partnerships with the African Development Bank, with SACAO, and with FAO, and we will continue to build on these. Our 2030 research and innovation strategy really emphasizes this new breed of partnerships to respond to today's more complex and interlinked challenges. We hope that as one CGIAR, we will be much better equipped to respond to these challenges, together with partners across all sectors. So I think we've enjoyed a very fruitful discussion, a very productive session, and let me close by saying just how grateful I am for everyone joining, for the insights that we've heard. I'm really encouraged by your vision and your conviction, and remind us all that this is the decade for action. We really have no time to lose, and I look forward to moving ahead with all of you. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Fermin, and back to you.
My pleasure. So thanks everybody for joining. We had a lovely event today. So I invite you to follow up with the second week of COP as we continue discussing and to look for further food systems and agriculture events on the coming days here in Glasgow. So thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day.